December 29th, 2025 is the 3-year anniversary while I addressed to the Bronies in FIM Fiction that I am no longer a Brony. And ever since then, me thinking about My Little Pony here and there, despite not watching new material from Generation 5 or going back to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic or Equestria Girls, really hasn't changed this channel a lot due to the fact that I've been into newer content. If I'm referring to my time of getting into Steven Universe and We Bear Bears back in July of 2020. So, to wrap up 2025, I've been considerate on doing a video of My Little Pony when it comes to Lonely Vibes in the same ways as Equestria Girls Lonely Vibes that I've made back in June of 2023. But the reason why it took time for me to considered on doing this video is mainly the fact that this is one of my least projects to do in comparison to major projects, and the fact that My Little Pony itself just isn't really the same. But at the end of the day, when I got the energy to finally make this video, it's literally the best to describe of what is happening when it comes to the status of My Little Pony, since that this decade is not even half as good compared to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, since that it was honestly a monster hit in the last decade. I've started watching My Little Pony Friendship is Magic before I turned into an adult, which is my 18th birthday in 2016. And that was mainly the fact that I was into Equestria Girls, and this really changed my life, especially since that the month after my birthday, I've officially launched my YouTube channel. Well, despite not being My Little Pony when it's mostly Equestria Girls related, I still feel like that this show still changed due to the passion that this show gave me. This was the show that I was so invested to the point that, looking back, this really felt like a show that can change your life forever. But apparently forever doesn't really exist when it comes to these types of TV shows with the type of emotions that you have and new interests that you ended up having later on. But since that, for the rest of 2020, for the 2010s, without looking into newer cartoons, well, in older cartoons like Steven Universe, this show was something that I was so occupied to the point that I never got burned out. I never felt burned out when it comes to Friendship is Magic, to the point that I really enjoyed doing the fanfics a year after I became a fan, especially that it got me invested into doing more and more fanfics when it comes to characters that were so iconic and really likable. The purpose that I had on FIM Fiction is that aside from posting blogs from other stories that are non-My Little Pony, I really was invested into doing fanfics that really made me want to see more in the show but couldn't be able to have it, so I used fanfics to cope with it in some occasions. And the idea of making these fanfics a lot more memorable and really inspirational, well, granted, I'm not a great fanfic writer due to my issues, but at the same time, this really became a good obsession to the point that I wanted to make more and more fanfiction. Honestly, My Little Pony was the reason that got me into fanfiction, to the point that I can't really left out any My Little Pony or even Equestria Girls related, because without it, I wouldn't be able to get into fanfiction in some other way. Especially that elf fanfic readings have become a thing since 2019, and after doing fanfic readings based off of other fanfic writers on FIM Fiction, including myself, honestly, there wouldn't be a lonely fanfic readings whatsoever. Granted, it's mostly a different story when it comes to fanfics that are not My Little Pony, but then again, if I'm willing to express my fanfics or lonely fanfic readings, it will have to be a separate video. My point is that every time I've been so invested with My Little Pony due to what it contributed of me enjoying the show and episodes of it, it was something that I never felt since that back then. The cartoons that I used to watch, like Adventure Time, didn't really catch my interest into making any videos due to the fact that I'm just not really... I was new to making videos, and making videos centering around those just wasn't something I can start with. And taking into consideration on the fact that this show gave me the inspiration on making videos through the remainder of 2016, I'm pretty sure that there was no other show that were probably able to make me invested into making videos and having opinions I can express on Friendship is Magic's episodes. Now, back then, when the Brony fandom was mostly good, since that 2016, while not the best year when it comes to Bronies, for me personally, being part of the Brony fandom really got me so invested. It really made me see the good things, considering that my mom was shocked when she witnessed the unexpected Bronies DVD. Well, there are male Bronies part of the My Little Pony fandom, and I have to admit, despite the fact that BronyCon is officially history, I actually wanted to go to BronyCon or a pony convention just to express my enjoyment in the series. Granted, that ship has sailed, and I'm not really interested into going to any convention, but the thought that really counts on seeing so many people who really makes this community way more worthwhile, to the point that it's even more bigger than basically the other fandoms. Granted, that's what I felt, but at the same time, I can't be able to think that there was another fandom that would have this growing popularity. But at the same time, judging of how that the fandom is slowly dying down after 2019, pushing aside COVID-19, honestly, there was a reason that me being invested with Generation 5 was really low. Like, incredibly low. If any of you guys don't remember, I've been making Generation 5 prediction videos from 2019 through 2021, just before a new generation came out, and honestly, despite those videos being mostly a waste of time, it really showcases of how much I just couldn't be able to get into Generation 5. After watching the first 3 episodes of Make Your Mark, I just stopped watching it. And that was in 2022, while me binge watching shows or other material have been really, really, really low. Not to say that Generation 5 is terrible, but at the same time, I still found it really upsetting that this is mostly a sequel towards Generation 4 instead of being a reboot of being its own thing by separating it from Generation 4. And every time I just watch these episodes, it's just basically the same material that I've seen from Friendship is Magic, except that it's in CGI, which, to be fair, CGI budgets have excuses, but at the same time, I tried giving the CGI a chance, and while it's not terrible, it didn't win me over. And truthfully, thinking about Generation 5 in particular, of how it ended roughly just not as long compared to Generation 4. In fact, I think it ended shortly until Generation 4's Season 4. But that really sums up a lot that even though some people enjoy the show, this show just didn't really capture everyone else's attention compared to Generation 4, which they possibly did, but thinking about it into the consideration of how much that Generation 4 just really feels like a less Generation 4 in some of the aspects that really makes it less impactful than before, then I can't really see myself enjoying this type of show, considering that I was using some of the characters in my fanfics in 2021, and I tried to be invested with them, but unfortunately, the disappointment and the stress really got in the way to the point that I had to stop. Like, I really, really had to stop. I'm not saying that it was Generation 5's fault for making me really depressed or empty, but at the end of the day, this is where I have to move on, since that the franchise of My Little Pony itself just refuses to take Wix's, I know I keep saying that with a W, I'm bad at R's, by making an original show like what Friendship is Magic did back in 2010. But unfortunately, I couldn't be able to find any type of investment due to it being a sequel that takes place a long time. Granted, environments and locations changed over centuries and possibly generations by Generation 5's logic, but unfortunately, it doesn't really change the fact that I can't be able to enjoy this show for just taking place in the same universe as Generation 4. Like, let me be perfectly clear. Whenever I try to think of the positives and good things involving My Little Pony, I would have to be in 2016 all over again to be invested. But unfortunately, you can't go back in time or try to revisit a time because you can't go back to the future. Pun not intended. Your emotions just can't be able to, from the past at least, come back, which is honestly a real shame because you really miss those vibes, and those vibes aren't able to come back due to what you're feeling and how basically what you're feeling now that really makes the vibes and emotions feel empty. And the thing is that whenever I look at Friendship is Magic, despite not rewatching episodes or fanfics, reading fanfics, I just feel like that this show was just basically at a time where people were so talking about it that now if I show an episode to someone who is a non-fan, they may be invested, but they aren't. They probably want to focus on something else that is trending in their own time when it comes to vibes and emotions or opinions and whatnot. Granted, when I state emotions, it's mainly stating their emotions similar to mine, but it's in a different show and they have different opinions. But at the end of the day, if this show, despite being trendy on Netflix here and there or any other streaming service, it won't change the fact that it wouldn't have a successor, which makes me really disappointed on the fact that whenever you try to look into the positives of Generation 5, I would mostly agree with you if it has its own material that is different compared to Generation 4. Granted, it's not possible to make original content after the predecessor, but every time you take into consideration on how Generation 4 really changed your life, and when Generation 5 is about to come out, you really want to regain that charm, it's beyond impossible. And the thing is that whenever I enjoy characters like Apple Bloom, and I did a fanfic involving her and Peanut Butter having a date together, honestly, if I never wrote that fanfic back then, and I had this idea, and I had the idea now, it wouldn't even work. And truthfully, that's honestly the material that if you get the fanfic set up at a time, well, you have this amazing idea, and then when you post it, people are mostly going to enjoy it. That was at its time. Well, you are invested with the My Little Pony fandom, the show, among most of the material in the show, mainly the characters. But even though that I do have some kind of investment in characters in other cartoons, while they're not in the same levels as this show, well, with the exceptions of Steven Universe and We Bear Bears, keep in mind, you're probably going to have a difficult time trying to regain your enjoyment from an old show, to the point that when you take into the consideration on revisiting material from that show, it's gonna be really low. And thinking about it will probably be a lot more complicated, judging of how tedious it is that whenever you really want to go back to a show, but your mind and emotions just doesn't want you, sums up a lot that your other interests are probably a lot more bigger, but at the same time worth seeing through, which I'm gonna get to later, because I've addressed this in my Equestria Girls Lonely Vibes video, and I'm going to address it later on. The point is that while I really enjoyed multiple characters, especially since that there's a reason onto why I reviewed nearly all the episodes, with 3 My Little Pony months, which truthfully really sums up a lot that I was so invested into watching this show, making this the first show I reviewed all the episodes, with the following being Steven Universe being the second. It really gave, I don't think I'm ever going to do something like this again, unless if I get paid on Patreon when it comes to my Patreon tiers. Like, there was a passion into making My Little Pony months 1, 2, and 3, with the third being one of my favorites because of Spring Breakdown coming out, even though I didn't like that Equestria Girls special like I used to. But in all honesty, even your opinions changed, but back then it really felt like a vibe that is worth growing. But my point is that when I did the final My Little Pony marathon, which is the second marathon, I wanted to wrap up everything of My Little Pony Generation 4 to get myself set and ready for Generation 5. And throughout January, February, and the first days of March in 2020, I really wanted to up my game by reviewing all the episodes of My Little Pony, and truthfully, after my last My Little Pony review, the Big Mac question, I stopped watching My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, because I really discussed everything about it, and similar to Steven Universe, I really don't have any motivation into going back to these episodes. But since I've mentioned Steven Universe being the other show that I reviewed all the episodes, let's just keep this in mind on the fact that My Little Pony is less revisiting compared to Steven Universe, which I'm gonna get to later, but you're just gonna have to wait a little bit more longer. Let's get back to the bronies of the fandom. Before we get to the infamous, let's go talk about bronies reacts. I actually did reacts involving My Little Pony material on MLP forums, which was a website that you can express your opinions and material of the franchise itself, which I used to have an account on this, but after being grown out of My Little Pony, I barely come back to this place. But taking into the consideration the fact that My Little Pony was so popular that it was too difficult to left alone, I actually made a reaction off of the first 2 episodes of Season 7. Granted, it's probably difficult to find, but at the same time, there were multiple videos of people reacting to My Little Pony, and while I did witness reactions before, this was honestly a gold mine of reactions when people are so invested with the franchise. Mainly this reaction that probably happened in Houston, Texas back in 2012, where people are reacting to the finale of Season 2. Honestly, this was a vibe that I really wish I was a part of. Granted, I don't live in Texas, but if I did, I would try to actually be part of this if I was a fan of the show in 2012 or even before that. My point is that the Bronies Reacts or Bronies Analysis Reacts really felt like something that really makes the fandom worth alive, and while it's where the cringe factor come in, it's honestly a good thing that I didn't notice the word cringe and it wasn't that too severe later on, because if I did hear that and I think about the word and the implications while sitting through these videos, I wouldn't be able to enjoy myself. But my point is that with reactions like this, it really got me so invested to the point that it made the Brony fandom more alive and the fandom growing in some of the capacity. In all honesty, the fact that groups of people are probably never going to grow a fandom this big in the future will probably be up to the show's quality and execution in order to have a growing fan base where multiple people sit together and witnessing the episodes of Friendship is Magic, because it really feels like that the beginning and end, mainly the first and final episodes of each season, really felt like an event that people are creating. And thinking of how that this really got me so invested to the point that I really wanted to make material off of Friendship is Magic really made me impressed. Now, I did make this avatar, not back then when there was a website where you can make your own avatar of a pony, and while I don't use this pony avatar anymore, I have to admit that this really empathizes of how much I really felt right at home in the Brony fandom. Because being a Brony, while being a little bit embarrassing to some people, it really feels a little bit more acceptive. And thinking of how that there are more and more material when it comes to people making Brony material, like Pony Meets World or Brony Meets World or something, World Meets Brony or something. This is honestly the material that I was so invested in, to where it's literally possible to make anything out of My Little Pony and just make it into your own livelihood by having vibes and emotions to keep going and going. Granted, how I wrote it felt awkward, but in all seriousness, Even though that I do like the idea of humans interacting with cartoon characters, Pony Meets World really felt like a big accomplishment. And while there are material where humans do interact with cartoon characters and video game characters, it's difficult to overlook of what the people who made Pony Meets World are really capable of, and what really gave us some kind of enjoyment. Even though that I wish I would do reactions of this, at the same time, what's best is that you have these memories and you try to treasure them in some other way. So, let's get into the bad things about the fandom, and it's really obvious that when you see pics of these, honestly, I have to look through these informations when it comes to how every community isn't really the best when it comes to people harming minors, but at the same time, it really didn't get in the way, but mainly for me. And in all honesty, when I look at these types of informations back in late 2018 and more about it, I really feel like that being a little bit more protective of the fandom is an important step, since that at the end of the day, the show is still for kids. And the fact that bronies that we usually see through like sawtooth waves, honestly, it really damages the fandom more, which sums up a lot that you really looked up to these people. But to give this fandom credit, this is something that other fandoms should take into consideration of, but considering that we never ever see actual predators or basically anything else in other fandoms, and it's just little, honestly, I wouldn't even prefer the idea of weird art being an issue or weird fans being an issue in fandoms, because truth be told, regardless if fandoms are supposed to be different, cartoon characters aren't being harmed. Real children and people are getting harmed due to stuff like this, and that's something I could get on board with. But since that we don't even see that a lot in other fandoms, honestly, other fandoms aren't really taking into consideration on what I've witnessed or what other people have witnessed in the My Little Pony fandom and even the Brony fandom. Now, I understand that there's not a lot of people who found the Brony fandom the best thing ever, and there's always going to be just detractors. But at the end of the day, if most of the reactions are mostly sending death threats to people who are writing the episode, and mostly just harassing other people that didn't do anything wrong, then honestly, there's a line that you shouldn't cross. And truth be told, the fact that I've seen most of that type of stuff in other fandoms, it's unavoidable. And even though it's something that is worth taking into consideration by exposing, at the very least, they don't even compare it to minors getting harmed. And honestly, it's really sad that other fandoms aren't even doing that type of material, and with how cartoons are being treated when it comes to fans who are weird, when it comes to their obsession with cartoon characters and not real life characters, honestly, the depictions just don't work for me with that type of category. I'm just saying, like, I have nothing against you for being uncomfortable with the depictions of people obsessing with cartoon characters, but if those people aren't harming real life people and they're keeping most of it in fiction, people who are not these people, then I can't really be on board with it, because it really feels mostly a waste of time. And seeing most people just addressing it day in and day out over exaggerating on Twitter, I can't really feel the safety of people's enjoyment in cartoons, because while minor's totally understandable, and while I would say the same thing with grown adults, but when they go a little too far, it really acts like that a drawing really kills their lives, even though it wasn't really meant for them to begin with. And even if I may feel sympathy towards them for coming across them that are against their own will, I still can't be able to side with them with the whole depiction in cartoons if the cartoon characters aren't real. I'm sorry, but it's a thing that I've been carried on, and it's never ever going to change. Which is in the same veins of me not changing what you look at in media, but you don't have to hammer it too hard. My point is that there are good and bad things in the fandom itself, to the point that I really feel so alive back then, but at the end of the day, this is well that in 2022, while being invested into newer cartoons, my investment in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and the franchise in general have been dying down a lot more and more. And after watching Generation 5, I really had to move on, because 2021, while being the last year, not really the last year, but mainly the last year of me doing something My Little Pony related, and in 2022 there was so little that it was difficult for me to be really invested, I really had to drop this franchise, because the memories that I have for the franchise are still intact, and I do really feel like I really want to revisit My Little Pony Friendship is Magic in some other way, but nowadays, Friendship is Magic just isn't really the same as it was back then, and that really takes into, and that always applies to any other cartoon. I'm really just saying that every time that you think about a show that you really want to come back to, it's way more difficult to be invested again, since that it's an old show, and with a new show, brand new, and it didn't live up to your expectations, regardless if your expectations are mostly your fault, you still wanted something out of Generation 5 that would let you keep staying, but at the end of the day, it just isn't really enough to instantly make you feel more invested. Like, every time I think about Friendship is Magic, it just really sums up a lot that it's a one-of-a-kind, and I want Generation 5 to be a one-of-a-kind. But since it's not a one-of-a-kind of its own, I just don't even have a purpose into sitting through this show, or basically any of the other material. Unlike my opinions towards Generation 4, so it just really feels like that the new generation itself just makes it way more difficult for me to feel any purpose into coming back to, due to it being a sequel towards Generation 4. And with how my channel has changed drastically over the last few years, and with 2023 through now were showcases of how much my channel just isn't really My Little Pony related anymore, there's more of a reason onto why shows that I haven't sit through before, like We Bet Bills and Steven Universe, among other shows like Amphibia and the Owl House, have become my new comfort shows. Because thinking of how that these shows really changed my YouTube channel drastically since this decade began, well, mainly mid-2020, honestly, I really don't have much of a desire of having My Little Pony Friendship is Magic being my staple for my YouTube channel, because truthfully, if it became my biggest focus, I would have no material at all, and I would probably have less videos to upload. Granted, I do have old shows that I did sit through childhood, but at the same time, when these shows came into mind and upon rewatching them, it really changed my YouTube channel as well. Just because My Little Pony Friendship is Magic changed my life and inspired me on making a YouTube channel, despite with other aspects, doesn't mean that any other show or any other material won't do the same. Like, it's really, like, thinking of how that the newer years that I've been having when it comes to doing newer videos other than My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, or basically the fandom itself, showcases of how much that I can easily go back to these shows to the point that there was so much to sit through. And while there are material that is worth going back to in Friendship is Magic compared to the shows that I've gotten into, it's honestly more of a stretch. Granted, I am never going to get into shows that I used to get into, like Adventure Time and whatnot, but when it comes to shows like Quake of the Creek, Steven Universe, and Weird Bad Bells, and Disney Channel shows, honestly, moving forward is really the best option by witnessing these shows. And while it is a shame that some of these shows didn't last longer where they should, it really gave me a purpose of moving forward, because even though that there are issues involving the shows and fandoms themselves, compared to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, while they're not better than the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic if you ignore all the bad stuff, at the same time, there's something worth sitting through with the material that they have, where they don't mostly make the viewers a little dumbed down. Now, yes, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic never dumbed down its audience, but at the same time, in the later seasons where they use the same ideals over and over again, it gets really, really repetitive. And while other shows have characters repeat their mistakes over and over again, at the very least I can still sit through these, because at the same time, while there's still nothing wrong on enjoying My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, on making other people uncomfortable if you're just enjoying the show itself and not doing cringy stuff, it doesn't change the fact that the other shows, while they do have cringy material here and there, are still worth revisiting when it comes to how the characters are not supposed to be the same as My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, despite the fact that they probably never took inspiration from those shows. And with shows that were popular alongside My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, like Gravity Falls, there was new things that I've experienced that I would probably never have if I was sticking to My Little Pony forever. And while I do have different opinions on the shows itself, keep in mind, this really got me so invested with so many different opportunities that it gave me a purpose of continuing a lot more. And that argument really does stay the same after addressing it in my Equestria Girls Lonely Vibes videos. Because if I never did the Steven Universe, if I never got into Steven Universe, I would have never done Steven Universe of the Creek. If I never got into Weird Bad Bells, I wouldn't to make fanfiction centered around them. And if it wasn't for the fact that Affinity Train became so unique, I wouldn't be able to have a purpose of streaming Cartoon Network shows on HBO Max. Which, honestly, the time I had with HBO Max back from 2020 through 2022, even to this day, it's a nightmare that Cartoon Network will never have the spark as it should have had since this decade began. But my point is that while My Little Pony Friendship is Magic may be something that I am fond towards in the past, nowadays, not so much. And with material of possibly doing a crossover between Generation 4 and 5, even though it could be false, honestly, if these were mostly real, I don't even think that revisiting these... I'm not even sure if revisiting this fandom or franchise would make it worthwhile, because it just wasn't really enough, and it didn't really help out any of the issues that I have when it comes to how I'm really mostly sick of the fandom as a whole. Keep in mind that nowadays people are really invested with Bluey, and to the point that it's becoming the next My Little Pony Generation 4, as in popularity when it comes to educational towards kids, and the fact that I did review episodes from the show, despite the fact that I couldn't be able to get into the show as much as everyone else. I'm just saying, I've moved forward with the My Little Pony material to the point that getting into Bluey will probably be mostly a waste of time. Not to say that the show is terrible, but it will probably take a while for me if I'm ever going to be invested in a show that has one element that got me so invested that it made me invested with literally everything else. But that's just basically luck when it comes to a show. Well, it could be just as the same, it could be its own thing, which it is its own thing in comparison to My Little Pony Generation 4. And while there are some people who express their opinions on Generation 5, at the same time, it won't be enough. And moving past that, I'm going to read this entire thing to you so that you can get an understanding on how I felt back then. Ever since this year started, I haven't published a single MLP story, especially since my LGBT story got taken down, but if you ask me, I couldn't bring myself to reconsider. Not because FIM Fiction's finale is 3 years old, but I couldn't get myself interested into the Gen 5 characters over the last year. After watching 3 episodes of Make Your Mark, it didn't win me over at all. I still didn't enjoy the Gen 5... I know I spelled that word wrong, but whatever. Gen 5 film even after watching people's opinions over it. And this may be a bit shocking, but the more time passes, the more I'm starting to get triggered over Equestria Girls. I couldn't enjoy the songs due to the plot issues and the characters actually got on my nerves way more than I thought. I don't hate Equestria Girls, but since we never got a conclusion, there was no meaning for me to enjoy it. Yes, I wrote tons of stories involving the Equestria Girls, but compared to other shows I've easily got back to, it's never going to be easy to get back to the thing that got me in the fandom of My Little Pony and Bronies in the first place. My point is, I barely found any positivity over the course of this year, unlike last year's. With so much terrible things going on, I doubt 2023 will be an improvement. It's just hard to get into newer or even older media. And since I never went to a My Little Pony convention, I don't think it's worth it anymore. Don't mention Petals, that's far from the case. And I especially couldn't get back into watching Friendship is Magic knowing how poor Gen 5 delivered, with it taking place in the same universe, which really threw me off. Will I ever write another My Little Pony story? I doubt it. It would probably take a long time to get back into the fandom or try to look back on FIM or Equestria Girls, and considering Equestria Girls is turning 10 years old in June, I might talk about it, what I felt about it, since my opinions have changed. Granted, it's not going to be a blog, but making videos is what I usually do when it comes to topics. Honestly, with this being 3 years old, it really makes me feel like a different person in the fandom, rather than the Brony that I used to be. And while there are some people who've expressed that the fandom or community gave me for a time and something I can treasure, I took their advice. And I really feel like that taking their advice is what's really important on your vibes and nostalgia of this show. But at the end of the day, you can't be able to relive that nostalgia or try to rebirth that nostalgia, and that is something that really showcases of how much that nowadays I don't think I'm ever going to be invested with My Little Pony new material because of how things have been taking a turn. They are trying to do a total brand reinvention in 2027 with tons of new content and material, which may be good for the fandom, but at the same time, I'm not sure if I'm going to be on board with it. And when it comes to this tweet, they're going to be making a live-action My Little Pony movie, which I'm not really interested in it because, honestly, with how poorly live-action shows have been, aside from Sonic the Hedgehog, I don't even think that this would be a good idea. And while it could surprise people if it's done right, I don't even think if this movie ever released in theaters, I don't even think I would probably waste my money by sitting through the entire film, since that I'm really picky on the movies that I go to. There's a reason why I skipped Jurassic World Rebirth in theaters. And honestly, thinking of how the newer material of My Little Pony was when it comes to people looking into different material in Generation 5, something that I couldn't. Honestly, I can relate to them on being into newer content. But unfortunately, with how I couldn't, with how newer material and material from other cartoons really got me more invested, there's really no point of me of having My Little Pony being the staple of my YouTube channel, because if it were, I wouldn't have Steven Universe, Rebel Bells, Quake of the Greek, Gravity Falls, among other cartoons, being the focus of my YouTube channel. And with possible ideals being into consideration, they're worth making off of them rather than My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Like, I just feel like that the more I look into cartoons that aren't My Little Pony, there was something that I seen in them that I really gravitate the most rather than My Little Pony itself. And while it's not the case with every other fandom, at the end of the day, I really feel like that if I did a crossover between My Little Pony and the other shows, it probably wouldn't even fit my vision. To the point that My Little Pony, while something that it got accepted, is still something that I can't be able to translate into a crossover due to how mostly overweighted it is compared to other cartoons. And what I mean overweighted is the fact that the issues involving Equestria Girls of you have to accept it for the decisions that it makes still implies in My Little Pony, which in all honesty doesn't make me enjoy the show anymore, which there's a reason on to why I am not one of those people who enjoyed Adventure Time despite enjoying seasons 1 and 2 and some episodes. Because while it's one thing to take into consideration that it may not be the case, but at the same time, when it hammers in a little too hard, it mostly makes you uncomfortable in a way where you just can't be able to express yourself on a show that expects you to look at it at its own point of view, which is something that wasn't really carried on a lot when it comes to people watching other cartoons. With that being said, that's basically all I have to say about my vibes of My Little Pony and being a Brony, and how a Brony mostly changed my life and wanting to make a YouTube channel by making videos centering around it. And while as much as my YouTube channel has changed over the last few years, I still treasure My Little Pony in some other way. Because I don't even think that there was any other way for me to make a YouTube channel without My Little Pony. So it's really a gift that makes you keep going by doing different ideals and try to make vibes out of those different ideals. And while it is a shame that you can't be able to regain the vibes of the shows that you enjoy, specifically this show, at the end of the day, I really still feel like that making these types of material was something that is worthwhile and I wouldn't be able to come back to. Like, with this video being less than 2 minutes, I didn't really learn a lot at the age of 18 through 19, to the point that a dog and a pony show just really felt less interested since I've been watching and reviewing My Little Pony episodes back to back. And the same thing applies to my ×3 marathon centering around Lake of the Creek, OKKO, and We Bear Bears, despite taking hiatuses. Or basically a big hiatus, but still. I really feel like that if I'm ever going to come back to this show, it would have to be a time while I'm really burned out into basically doing any other cartoon that isn't My Little Pony. But that's just going to be a lot more difficult to consider. Because no matter how much you try, no matter how much you try to come back to the past when it comes to revisiting memories, the newer stuff would change your life eventually. To the point that you have new ideals, and nowadays, you never think about My Little Pony, and when you do think about My Little Pony, it's mainly something that you really want to come back to, but you can't. Which is why that shows like Steven Universe, We Bear Bears, among others, really changed my YouTube channel a lot more. And while some people may disagree with me on that take, at the end of the day, you have to admit that you were once part of the My Little Pony fandom, but you also enjoy other shows that you've grown accustomed towards. And if you mostly relate to where I'm coming from when it comes to enjoying shows outside of My Little Pony, despite with issues here and there, honestly, there was more to life than My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, or My Little Pony in general. And while it is a shame that you're probably never going to have those vibes again, you at least attempted to try something new. I'm just saying, I really had a great time in the fandom, and me making this video may be a long time coming, but it was worth the wait, and expressing it on the 3rd anniversary of me addressing that I'm no longer a Brony. Honestly, this is the closest I'm ever going to recapture vibes involving My Little Pony, because I don't think that there's anything else that I can recapture some kind of vibes. So with 2025 coming to a close in the next few days, I'm Lonely Fanboy 480, and if you still haven't watched My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, give it a chance, but don't expect material or answers from me, because I've moved on from this series, and if you feel the same way, you might move on as well. And while it may be an over-exaggeration when it comes to it being a fact, it's still mostly the truth.